founder of the Dragonfly Productions and Ballet Folclórico Boriquén, and board member for Women in Aviation and the Hispanic Association of Aviation and Aerospace Professional. She inspires young Latinos and Latinas to dream big, carrying forward her father's legacy of service and her own remarkable contributions. We also welcome Armando Villaflores, the eldest son of Armando Diaz Flores and Maria Luisa Villa. Born in Corpus Christi, Texas, Armando graduated from Roy Miller High School in 1968. After earning a degree in electrical engineering from here, UT Austin, in 1973, he embarked on a 32-year career with IBM, retiring as a senior marketing manager in 2005. Armando is a proud father of two and honors the memory of his eldest son, who served his country with dedication. Today, he cherishes his role as a grandfather to two grandchildren and a great-grandson, sharing his wisdom and love across generations. And we're very grateful to have Olga and Armando here to share their father's legacy with us. So thank you very much. This is going to be like a casual conversation. We want to learn a little bit about what was the experience, right, in the home front. I think this is important because we were able to collect all these really powerful stories of your fathers. So my first question is, how have your father's military experience during World War II influenced your family values and perspectives on service and sacrifice?
Well, thank you for having me today, Manuel, and it's an honor to be here to share more of my father's legacy. He's 99. We celebrated his birthday last week, and I wanted to bring him, but it wasn't possible. So, yes, sure.
Thank you.
Thank you. But once again, an honor to be here to share part of that legacy. Well, my dad was a very proud military soldier, I'll tell you that much. And that's who my role model was, my inspiration for me to follow his footsteps. But like he said in that short video that you just saw, that military service and family were number one for him. His military service, he was very proud of that. He followed his brother because his brother had joined the military. He figured that that's what he would do. He was very, very young, I think 17 or 18 years old when he went to join the service, and it was World War II. And he shared a story with me that they were on the coast up in Oregon, and they were called to duty before they crossed the Pacific to help with the fires in Tillamook that happened there. And we had the opportunity not too long ago in a cruise that we took to land in Oregon, and we went to a museum trying to find more information about that. But he was quite interested in doing that. But his military service, not only in World War II, but in the Korean War, he didn't speak about it very much because he kept his work and family kind of separate. But my mother was his biggest advocate, and not only, when he couldn't speak up for himself, she spoke. And sometimes she got in trouble for that. But he was very, very proud of that. And to him, family was important as well. But service was a great thing that he showed how proud he was, and like I said, he was what inspired me to continue into the military service.
Hi, I also want to thank you for this opportunity. I really appreciate it. You saw Dad talking about when he was in the military and being a dresser Shepherd's Field as an American, first time ever. And I started thinking about why was that? Well, we have to remember that was during segregation, right? Brown versus Board of Education didn't happen in '54, right? So he grew up going to a Mexican-American school. He also talked in, I'm not going to repeat the words that he said in the interview, but there was some pretty derogatory remarks given to him in his life. I can only imagine the obstacles that he encountered growing up in Corpus, born in Mission, living in Corpus. I think that had an impact on him. And we can get into some details about what he did after he was honorably discharged, dealing with service to the community, providing for the family, even involved in civil service. He ended up becoming a judge in Corpus, dealing with international sister city basketball tournaments. I played in some of those tournaments with a bunch of buddies of mine. And so he was constantly involved afterwards, throughout his life, in the community, providing for his family, and instilling those values to us: family, education, right? We are not other. We are not limited by our being born Hispanic, Chicano, Latino. So there was an encouragement. He provided a base, very strong foundation for us, and we can get into where we went from there. But that's basically it.
Thank you very much. We touched a little bit into the topics of obstacles and discrimination that they experienced throughout their military career. How do you think those stories that he shared with both of you and that he's sharing with us, with Voces, impacted your life, your career, your civic engagement, for example?
Well, one of the things I learned from my dad is resilience. He taught me that no matter what was happening at the time, we always made the best of the situation and moved on. And I always knew, I learned it from him, that today's one day, tomorrow's another, and things do not remain constant. So it's not for the rest of your life, but you move on and you find ways to get around, over, or break those barriers or challenges. And that's what I learned from him. And I don't realize that, because when you find out about yourself and look back and reflect, that's when you realize the things that my parents taught me and why I was able to forge my military career and my future and how I handle family and service, and not only in the military, but to community. And right now for me, giving back is my priority number one, because I've been so blessed with having a career and a life that I could never have imagined. But my parents set that for me, especially my dad. He was the quiet one. Mom was not, but it is what it is, right? And so I got from both of them. But anytime Dad would have a setback in any situation, I could see he just would sit and contemplate and move on. And he was always smiling. His attitude, I think, is what has brought him to 99 years old. It's always positive. And I think that's a factor that I've learned from him as well, even though I worry a lot about everything. But he's always been looking at the best of every situation. But he really loved his military career and what he did. He was in communications, and nowadays that would be called cybersecurity. So he was able to train foreign troops. And I think, just reflecting back, the fact that any assignment he took, he made sure that the family went with him, because that was important as well. So any assignment that he looked for, we were there with him. And our family unit was my mother, my brother, myself, and my dad. And we made that tight circle. And they always made us feel safe, secure, and loved. And that environment was important. But he tried to get assignments overseas. And I don't know why that was, but we lived in Taiwan, we lived in Iran, and we lived in Paraguay. And it was something that I think influenced me seeing the world, seeing that other cultures, people, as different as they are, speaking a different language, you come to respect them, and that's something he learned as a foreign military attaché there in all these countries we live. So he was able to give respect and get respect, and I learned that from him.
I would say that one of the things that Dad would repeat over and over and over to us as growing up to each of the children was really a small excerpt from a poem by Alexander Pope, Essay of Man. And it states that honor and shame from no condition rise, act well your part, there all the honor lies. I took it to mean that, again, I was not limited by my birth. I had all the opportunities available to me. I could do whatever I wanted to. I just needed to work hard, get an education, which led me to UT. All my siblings, myself, my siblings, all have college degrees. 3 from the University of Texas, 1 from the University of Colorado, Colorado Springs. All the grandchildren to date have degrees, right? And I'm pretty sure the great-grandkids will get degrees, or I'll beat the living. So there was this this foundation that he created, that through example, through his work in the communities. When Dad came back, he learned how to run an offset printing machine. It turned out that at the courthouse in Corpus Christi, they bought an offset printing machine, but had nobody who knew how to run it. Right? So Dad went over there, he got a job with the offset printing machine, printing all the warrants, citations, and everything. Why is that a big deal? It's because they didn't have to outsource all the printing. Saved them a lot of money. Right? A few years later, there was an opening in 105th District Court for a court interpreter. They needed a court interpreter. Dad was a very personable guy, real outgoing. So he had a chance to go in and show that he could do the job. He got the job, right? So he was a court interpreter. During that time, he also saw a need for a insurance company that would sell to the community, Hispanics, right? He opened up Florida's Insurance Agency. It was the front of the house where we lived. That was the office. The back was where we lived with Grandma, Dad's mom, right? Diana Diaz, man, could she cook. So Dad would work during the day. Mom would take care of the office during the day, right? Then he'd get off work, go to the office, and have it open in the evenings for customers, right? You see the family dynamic there. Mom helping Dad, Dad helping Mom, the whole family, Grandma, everybody, right? Eventually, Grandma, his mom, left to live with another relative. Grandpa, Mom's dad, came and lived with us. We still take care of our elders, right? So that was the kind of foundation, the kind of values that were instilled in us, right? Then, after he was a court interpreter, an opening showed up in Precinct 1, Place 1. There was a JP office, right? That was a nice guy, had friends, connections. He got appointed to that position, right, until the next election cycle. Mom encouraged him to run, pushed him to run, right? So he ran, and he won. He became a Justice of the Peace. Served from 65 to 7 years later, 77 or so. Then he decides to run for county commissioner, right? Lost, right? So he's out of business for a little while. He decides in later, 77 I believe it was, to run for his old position. Won and held it through 87 and basically retired after that. But then in October 99, another vacancy showed up in that seat, and he was asked to come back and hold it until the following election cycle, which was December 2000. Right? In that little interim period, around 91, he and a couple other friends of his, Ray Madrigal and Jesse Hicks, decided to create in Corpus Christi a TV show called The Coffee Club. What was the purpose of the Coffee Club? To give, it was a public access, right? To give the community information about civic matters, things that were important to the community. In addition to that, they interviewed politicians, right? Who, for instance, they interviewed George W. Bush, Gary Morrow in 1998, right? So they had a total of 12 years of Coffee Club sessions that were taped. So 700 tapes were given to Corpus Christi A&M archives for future research. Now they also collect a lot of information about the community, so it's not just the Coffee Club, it's the GI Forum, it's everything. Because we have to remember that Corpus Christi is a hotbed, right? LULACs were formed in 1929 in Corpus Christi. American GI Forum was formed in 48 in Corpus Christi. Right? When Brown versus Education supposedly ended segregation, we're still having lawsuits, Cisneros versus Corpus Christi Independent School District in 1970 to try to get equality into the school systems. Right? So the struggle has been long, but there's a base, right, that Dad was involved in. So I think a lot of that activity, I can't be sure, but I point back to that statement he made. In the service, he was an American. He can do it. Right? Si se puede.
I'm talking a little bit about service. I'm very curious to know how much of an influence in your career choices were your father's experiences in the military. You decided to join the military, but you didn't. So I'm a little bit curious about those conversations that happened.
Dad didn't talk much about the military service. Neither did my Uncle Mike, who was a Pearl Harbor survivor, Korean War vet. Neither did my Uncle Martin, Army. They just didn't talk about it. During the Vietnam War, I had, my number was 300 and something. I married at an early age. I was 20 years old when I married and attended UT. I finally went A1 after graduation. They never called my number. I did receive a lot of emails or notices that they need platoon leaders. And I know why they needed platoon leaders. So I just had focused on getting the education, getting to work at ABM, and providing for my family.
Well, I kind of shared a little bit why I joined the military because of my dad. But he was enlisted, and my goal was to become an officer in the Air Force. And I wanted to meet Dad kind of halfway. I said, okay, I'm going to join the military, but it's going to be the Air Force. And he was okay with that. I went to ROTC to see if I could join that, but women weren't allowed at the time, unbeknownst to me. And I was only 16 years old when I graduated high school. Because of my DOD school education, I had enough credits to graduate. So too young to do anything else but go to school. Continued there. I went to the University of Puerto Rico. My dad, when he finished World War II, he came back and he went to the University of Puerto Rico, finished 1 year of college, and then before he was able to register for his second year, he got sick. So he missed that first semester and had to wait a whole other year before he actually was able to continue. So that's when he decided to leave Puerto Rico, see what he could find, and he did some jobs up in New York. But then decided that the military was probably going to be the best option for him, and he rejoined the military at that time. So having seen the fact that and heard that he had gone to college and tried to do that, I wanted to make sure that, and they did too, that I went to school. So I went there and finished my degree. It was going to be in math and science, but not being able to join the ROTC, I had to change it to business. And I was figuring that accounting would be a good option because it had numbers, but accounting is not math. So I had to drop that class and then go back and take it again in order to get my degree. So I figured with a degree things would be great, and it took me 10 years before I was able and given the opportunity to join the service. And I kept that in the back of my dream sheet, if you will, because it is something that I really knew that I was called to do, but timing's everything. And at the time that I was able to join, they opened up the undergraduate pilot training courses for women in the Air Force. The Navy was first. They were a few years before the Air Force. And I asked Dad, I said, Dad, do you mind if I join the Air Force? I know I'm not following your footsteps in the Army, and he was okay with that. But at the time I was married, my husband and I had a 3.5-year-old daughter, and my mom thought I was crazy. And she said, what are you doing? You have a great life, you have a great job. I work for as a civil servant with the Department of Defense. And my husband was in the military at the time. He had been in the military about 4 years. And she says, you've got a good life. And I told her that this is something that I had to do. My husband supported me, Dad supported me, and off I went. But they were always there for me. It takes a village, and they were part of my inner circle and village. And Dad was very, very supportive. When I went to college, very proud of the fact that I went to, where he had started. And I have to say, I graduated debt-free because of them, and that was very important. And I am grateful for that, But I'm very proud of my dad's legacy, and he was part of the Borinqueneers. It was the only all-Hispanic regiment in the U.S. military. They were a segregated unit. They were recognized with the Congressional Gold Medal of Honor in 2014, and I had the honor of going with my dad to D.C. when they were awarded the actual Congressional Gold Medal of Honor. Very proud. I was so glad he was able to go. We were able to go with him to see that event. It was so memorable, and he was very proud of the service and the men that he served with that were able to go, that were still alive. I think there's, I don't know how many that are still alive that were part of the 65th Infantry, but it was the only all-Hispanic unit in U.S. Military history.
And if I'm not wrong, your dad enlisted with his brother, right?
Yes.
So, and I'm curious about it. Did he ever talk about the contrast between his experiences in Japan and then in Korea?
What he tried to do was, his brother was assigned to one unit and he was assigned to the other. But he was able to talk his way into getting assigned with his brother so they could serve together. He didn't talk about, how they were treated or anything like that. But the fact that he was able to serve with his brother was really important to him. And that's something he was able to do. But he just felt like, and I'm just trying to reflect at this very moment, the reason why we were overseas all the time, it was probably because we were all different, There was no discrimination, if you will. I'm sure living in the U.S., that would be a totally different story had we done that. And so I grew up without that discrimination in my head. I didn't know what that was, which was great, because that led me to see myself as an equal to everybody. And what you show people, how you feel, it comes through. And if you feel less, people will see that. So I was able to show that I was an equal and I deserved to be wherever I was. And that's something that I learned with my dad being able to have us in all his assignments. But education was big for him as well. And he shared a story in the military that he tried to become a warrant officer, and he was not able to, from being an enlisted to become a warrant officer. And it's very, very hard to do that. Once you're in, they got you, and that's it. They're not going to move you, because that would cost a lot of money for retraining. And I remember that story, which helped me, because when my husband joined, we were going to join together, and the recruiter denied me the opportunity to get an officer slot, even though I had the highest scores and I had my degree and was highly qualified for it. I was denied the opportunity. And I remember that story that Dad shared. I said, and the recruiter said, well, you can enlist and then try to become an officer later. And that story resonated and was in my mind, and I said, you know what, it's going to be too hard to do that, and that's not what I want. So why accept something less when you're qualified for something more? And I said no, and moved on. And it just, timing was everything. I waited for the right opportunity. So, you know, you stay open to those possibilities, looking for that right opportunity, and it came along. So I'm very, very grateful for that, and grateful for the fact that Dad had shared that story of how hard it was in the military to jump rank, you know, to become. It can be done, but it's not easy. And he found, I did hear stories of him saying that he found his advocates along the way on how he got his assignments, how he was able to you know, get better positions. And he talked about, you know, his commanders that helped him out. And those things also was something that I appreciate that he shared with me. So you have to be your own advocate and find your mentors and advocates along the way.
So I'm curious to know, what was the role of culture, language, food, religion, faith in their experience in the military? Did they share something related to those elements in particular? Because a lot of it is obviously a sense of belonging, especially for Latino servicemen and women who participated in Vietnam, Korea, the segregated units. What was the role of language and culture based on their experiences?
Well, there was certainly a sense of community in Corpus Christi when he came back, as evidenced by some of the things I talked about. He would work with some other veterans and community leaders to build Little League parks, Pony League parks, to have places where kids could play. I went through that whole Little League, Pony League scheme with a bunch of friends of mine, right? So we had places to go and play and stay out of trouble, right? It extended also to international activities, basketball. We had a sister city, I think I mentioned that, sister city with Monterrey, Mexico. So they would have international basketball teams going back and forth. At 17, I pulled a bunch of buddies of mine and we took off and drove to Monterrey, Mexico, a trip I wouldn't make today. But we did, 17, carload of 17-year-olds. And then we played them when they came down to Corpus Christi. I just wanted to add something else. My son, my oldest, graduated from the University of Texas in San Antonio with a mechanical engineering degree. And at age 29, he had a house and a brand new truck. He decided to drop that, and he joined the Marines. Went through basic infantry, and he wanted to be a recon Marine. And he died on active duty the day after Father's Day, 2006. Hit the family hard. Dad passed away a year later in December. Mom passed away a year later after that in December. I can't tell you for a fact that Dad influenced the decision to join the Marines. Right? But he did, my son did go down and live with Dad while he went to Del Mar Junior College. And Dad probably influenced him to some extent, because he really loved Dad. He respected him. When I received a call from Maggie, I think it was on a Tuesday, I didn't return the call until Friday. And the reason for that is I was down in Corpus, which I do now, year after year, tending the graves, polishing the brass, putting new flowers in, new flags, service flags, Marine for my son, Army for my dad, Army for my uncle, and Navy for my other uncle. So that respect for country, respect for those that serve, continues with me. As an aside, my sister's a veteran, non-active duty, but rank of lieutenant. So that's how my son, I think, got influenced.
Do you want to answer?
I'm totally involved in this.
I have a question.
Story.
No,
Wow.
don't worry. Thank you very much for sharing
Yeah.
your powerful story. I want to give time to the audience also to ask some questions. But I have a question. I'm curious to know. Let's say that you decide to volunteer for Voces, and you have to interview your respective fathers. What question would you ask to your father that you think we never ask in that interview, that you think will kind of like help you kind of collect some elements of the story? Or
Yeah. That's easy. My first question was is there anything that you regret? What would you do different? And I want to assume that it would be nothing, because the story would not be the same. I lived the story. Culture, that was the question before. It was very important, because even though we knew we were Americans, we were very proud of the fact that we were born in Puerto Rico. We spoke Spanish in the house all the time. When we lived in Paraguay, I had the chance to learn how to read and write it, which served me well, because when he retired, after 23 years in the service, we went back home, and I was able to read the textbooks and be able to continue my education back there, even though the textbooks back then were in English. And the classes were taught in Spanish, so everyone's fully bilingual. And so I was grateful for that we were proud to say that we are from Puerto Rico. And you can ask my kids. My daughter was born in Arkansas. Her son was born in Texas. Marcia was born in Little Rock, Arkansas, and Edwin was born in San Antonio, Texas. They both speak Spanish. That's something that we were very, very emphatic about. My husband and I, you have to learn how to speak Spanish, and they still do. And because of that, they, knowing two languages, very important. We're I guess the only country that only speaks one. You go to Europe and they speak 4 or 5 languages out there, and so that was important to us. Mom would always, do our typical dishes, and I'm so glad that she didn't want me in the kitchen, I'll tell you that. So I didn't learn how to cook until after I was married, and my husband's not here, so that's okay. So if he would tell the story, you know, I think I served him these cardboard pork chops for the first time after I got married, but Mom would just kick me out of the kitchen. She says, "Oh, you're not in here." So that was that. But I learned to love to cook, and my husband's very grateful for that. But she taught me a few of the dishes that she prepared, traditional dishes, and I was able to capture a recipe. I think my daughter got her recipes before I did, because my daughter says that she was her favorite. So she was #1 on speed dial when that was a thing, right? But culture and family, very important in our home, And my kids say that they're Puerto Rican, even though they were born outside of Puerto Rico.
What question will you ask Armando Sr.?
Looking back, I would, knowing some of the statistics on bomber crew survival rates, 25% is the survival rate on the first tour. I would ask him, "Dad, why did you want to be a gunner on a bomber?" That, of course, he didn't know the statistic at the time, but I guess that would be one question that I'd want to ask him. And I really can't think of anything else, because I really admired what he did after he came back. And I wouldn't want to second guess him.
Thank you very much. We see how, looking back at these testimonials and oral histories, the impact it had on both of you when you were sharing your stories. So my question is, what role do you believe centers like Voces play in preserving and sharing your father's legacy and other people's legacies, and why it is important for future generations?
Well, we've all heard that history is written by the winners, right? And we should consider ourselves winners. We should consider our history and our legacy and our stories just as important as anybody else's. And every story is important. And when the winners do not want to write us into their history, we have to make our stories known so future generations will hear them.
We stand on the shoulders of those that came before us. So you need to know who that is. What is the foundation that you're standing on? So you have a good, firm view of where you're going and what you're entitled to.
So now we have a couple of minutes to get questions from the audience. Anyone has questions? We have a lot of really interesting subjects here that I want to cover, so.
Yeah, I think you can hear me.
Okay.
I really appreciate your perspective and sharing your stories about your families. I think my dad was a World War II veteran. And I think one of the things that we have to remember is that people, I'm a graduate of UT Austin. We get to certain points in different ways. Your dad's, in some ways, reflected a very positive way, return from war. For a lot of veterans, and especially for the veterans' family, it was not so positive. PTSD, which wasn't known then, the discrimination they faced. In my particular case, I can remember from Hebbronville, Texas, that 3 or 4 of my fellow graduates from UT, we came specifically to college because our fathers did not want us to be in the military because of their experiences and discrimination. So it's something that I've talked to Maggie about. She's brought it up in terms of the different impacts. We still got to college, we still got through, but the perspective on the military was was very different. And so in my particular case, I wanted to go into the military. But my dad, who was a veteran in North Africa, in Italy, said, hell no. And this was at the time of the Vietnam draft. He said, I want you to go in to ROTC and be a second lieutenant. And like your dad, I didn't know what the survival rate of second lieutenants were in the Vietnam War. But I went in, and it was, fortunately for me, the recruiting sergeant and I took an instant dislike. He apparently didn't like Mexican Americans, and so I called my dad and said, hell no, I'm not joining ROTC. Years later, like decades later, I find out that my dad had already contacted relatives in Mexico and was going to smuggle me back to Mexico to Vietnam. But the point is that we all have a different way. You talked about your dad as a gunner. One of the people that became a judge in Jim Hogg County, Horacio Ramirez, was a tail gunner. And he was sick one day, his plane went out, nobody came back. He never flew in a plane again. He refused to they had to cajole him to go to Spain to meet one of his future brothers-in-law. But his kids graduated from college. So we come to the same contributions, the legacy in different ways. And I just wanted to make that point that Maggie has brought up the issue that there are different ways to get to the same point, and veterans had very different reactions to their service.
Any other questions?
I do. I have a question for Olga. I work for Southwest Airlines, and I know you work for American, and I've been there for 46 years. So we had our first combat veteran was a woman named Tammy Jo. And when she came to us, she had a difficult time, and she was white. So I want to understand how your father, your family, your upbringing, or did you have any kind of discrimination when you went to American? And how did the other pilots treat you? Because she would go out with us to eat. She would go shopping with us. Usually the pilots would go together. And, you know, when she rose to be a captain, things changed. So that's my question to you. How did you go from the military to commercial flying? That's a completely different kind of monster in itself. So.
Well, for me, in aviation, it's a male-dominated field. So I was around men all the time, and so was Tammy Jo. And Tammy Jo and I are friends.
Oh,
I do know her.
I love her.
I do know her. She's very sweet and kind, and so she was actually an instructor in the military, an instructor pilot, and she married one of her students. That's Dean.
Yes.
Right. But they had so much in common and everything. And when she went to Southwest, I guess it was very different. What she experienced to what I experienced.
Oh.
Because when I went to American, being one of the first few females there were over 6,000 pilots. There were only about 30 female pilots at American at the time. So we were dealing, at least I was dealing with older captains at the time. They didn't want us there. And I was like, sorry dude, you know, I'm here and I'm not going anywhere and you're gonna retire soon, so get out of my seat. So that was that, you know, I mean, you have to have that confidence to live in that world and work in that world. And I think I probably had just a little bit more confidence in Tammy Jo at the time. But I do want to share this story that when I graduated from the flight school at American to do my first aircraft, which was a 727, I was based in Chicago. I lived in San Antonio. I was hoping to be based in Dallas to make it an easy commute, but I ended up in Chicago. And when new pilots get together, they all pitch in and rent an apartment. They're all male. I wasn't gonna rent an apartment with all male. So I figured I'd go to the flight attendant academy and talk to the flight attendants and say, hey, you know, you just graduated, how many of you are going to Chicago? Can we rent an apartment together? Believe it or not, they turned their back on me.
Oh my goodness.
These are women turning their back on other women. I was shocked. I said, wow. So I can't be with the pilots because they're all male, and I can't be with flight attendants because they don't want me because I'm a pilot. And so that was, you know, very hurtful to me. I'm like, that's fine. So I figured it out. Eventually, you know, a few days into my first assignment at Chicago, I went to the bulletin board and there's like, need a roommate, and I'm just pulling all these strips and starting to call. And I found this one young lady, a flight attendant. She was young, but so wise. And I told her my situation. She goes, absolutely. So, you know, I mean, you just have to find that opportunity. And she was amazing. She was from Nebraska. And we had one other roommate. But the fact is that we're never there at the same time. We all have different schedules, so we come and go. And it worked out. It worked out. But that was something that I figured that the flight attendants would say, yeah, come with us, you know, I mean, you're a woman, but in the flight deck, it took a while to let our presence be known and show them that no matter what they did, no matter what they said, that we weren't going anywhere. So, you know, as you move up, you find that authority, and then when you become a captain, you're in charge.
Okay, we have time for one more question.
Although, maybe I was trying to listen too much and I missed it. Tell me what year did you, when it was not accepted to get into ROTC? You had attended DOD schools and you had graduated early?
In 1969.
Okay. So yeah, right, that's exactly. The reason I'm asking is I have a 26-year-old daughter. She lives in Manhattan, graduated from college a few years ago, and she went to a Catholic prep school here in Austin, and I remember your story reminds me of her graduation, and there were 2 or 3 girls in her class of 16, who are now, they got appointments with 2 with the Air Force Academy, 2 or 3 of them are aviators now. And it, not so much regarding being a Latina, but you know, that hasn't been that long ago. And yet these girls, they had the grades, they had everything they needed, and it wasn't even a question whether or not they were going to make it through doing what they're doing. And so, you know, it's so hard right now, especially with our political craziness, to forget that wasn't that long ago, but we have come a long way.
Yes.
And I'm not trying to put on my, you know, my feminist thing or anything, but, you know, I was 2 years old when you were going on, and I don't feel like I'm, you know, it hadn't even been 60 years yet. Yet girls today are doing exactly what they want to do. And so, you know, you definitely broke the barrier. And if that's not a reason to continue with your story and your dad's story, I don't know what is. And I really appreciate it.
And for me, you know, it was a double whammy. I am a woman and I am Latina.
Exactly.
So it's 2 things, you know. I have to overcome both of them. But like I said, I always felt like an equal and projected that. And people accept what you project.
Exactly.
Thank you.
Well, let's give our panelists a round of applause. Speak up. Thank you very much for joining us today, and thank you for so many insightful questions. Appreciate it. Have a good one.